Alan, but I think...
It's my gavel, so the new clerk will need to make their own arrangements.
Okay, General Assembly Session 10 is about to begin. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Just testing. Session 9.
Thank you, Moderator. About half a dozen people have pointed out to me that the minutes yesterday stopped at 4 p.m. I can assure you minutes continued to be taken after 4 p.m. I'm not entirely sure I can promise you everything that the moderator at the time said will be minuted may or may not be, because there are an awful lot of those promises flying around, and the looks on the faces of the minute takers may not always have correlated. And the point of all that is to say that the minutes beyond 4 p.m. weren't ready to publish last night, so we've got the minutes up to 4 p.m. yesterday. Hopefully later this evening we will publish the minutes for the remainder of yesterday and all of today, and we'll move that bit tomorrow morning. So now, Moderator, I would like to move acceptance of the minutes of the sessions up until 4 p.m. yesterday, please, subject to all the usual corrections and checking.
Okay. Yellow, orange cards, minutes approved?
Your microphone may be off, Moderator.
Please use your white cards to approve the minutes. Cards down. Anyone not approving of the minutes? All approved. Is Alan Yates around? Oh, I think we...
Is Alan Yates in the hall?
Alan!
I think you wish to say something.
Come on, Alan.
I was distracted.
Okay. Well, Helix.
Good afternoon, General Assembly. I wanted to try and reduce confusion. I know I normally do the opposite, but I wanted to try and reduce confusion. The debate before lunch was a fantastic debate, and finance came into it. And I don't want to jump up and down every time finance comes in, but want to reassure you that the Finance Committee will do everything they can to adhere to the wishes of General Assembly. But I also want to make clear, and I hope I haven't spread despondency and despair about deficit. You'll notice what I did there with 3 Ds, I hope. That's as close as I get to being. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Most of you, I hope, will recognise that as URC Treasurer and the Finance Committee that I'm convener of, we really only control, and actually control with a pretty small c, about 10% of the assets of the United Reformed Church. And of the 10% under our bailiwick, half of those, in very round terms, are either designated or restricted. So when I talk about we have a deficit on the M&M fund that is the responsibility of the URC Trust and the Finance Committee, it's a relatively small amount of the wealth of the United Reformed Church. So I don't want, I don't want to spread doom and gloom across the whole denomination because of that. I'm also very cognizant that I think if you look at an income and expenditure basis, I think every synod, or most of them, are running at a deficit as well. But they all have, and significantly more than the URC Trust does, they all have other forms of income that allow them to be generous and operate with a spirit of generosity, which I have noticed because they've helped to support the M&M fund over the last few years. So I just wanted to try and make clear that we are not a church of despondency. We're not a church where finance is driving everything and governing what you do. And I know our finance committee thinks of themselves as an enabling committee, not a preventing committee. So thank you for the opportunity to say that, and I apologise if I've set up an atmosphere of doom and gloom and deficit. Thank you, General Assembly.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Moderator. The Finance Committee will cease to exist in about 23 hours. I have spoken to the convener of the Resources Committee, and I have been assured that the same approach will continue.
So we are moving to paper H4 now, and John will explain why.
This is purely and simply because this is one bit of business we must not remainder, were we to end up in that position till tomorrow morning, because Nicola has to be in another meeting tomorrow morning. So we thought if we took this one the first thing this afternoon, then that would mean that that couldn't happen. It may well be in a session we get through all our remaining business. It may not. We may still have a coffee break and something afterwards, but we'll see how we do.
Marion and Nicola.
Moderator, General Assembly, for the last time. I'm here to present paper H4, amendments to the Plan for Partnership in Ministerial Remuneration. There are 4 areas where we are proposing changes to the plan at this time. I'll come back to that. The Maintenance of the Ministries Subcommittee of Ministries is regularly reviewing the wording of the Plan for Partnership and updating it. It's on their advice and with input of Finance Committee that we bring these proposed changes. So, it's quite simple. A change of the wording in 6.3.2 from spouse and children to spouse, partner and dependent children, to increase the fixed car allowance from 1,200 to 2,400 for cars and 300 to 600 for motorcycles, and urges local churches to implement this immediately. A change of wording from ministerial working week to ministerial hours, that's in 7. And to clarify changes to holiday entitlement in 8 to include when to carry over holiday to the following year for sick leave, parental leave or jury service, expectations for sabbatical and holiday leave, bank holidays and days in lieu for Christmas Day and Good Friday. Now, it has to be said that it's been drawn to our attention that there are certain ambiguities in other places in the Plan for Partnership. So what we'd like to say to you today is that we are open to consulting very widely on any changes that need to be made. We realise the Plan for Partnership affects local churches, pastorates and synods. So where there are ambiguities, we'll be consulting, we will be welcoming the comments of people into that process. And it's an ongoing piece of work that we undertake to do from today.
Point of order.
Ooh.
I believe there was an amendment to Resolution 22 on Friday's order paper, which I understood the committee had accepted.
Oh, sorry.
To change the date from September 24
sorry.
to January 25.
Sorry, I hadn't cut and pasted that bit. January 25, I remember that now, Michael. Thank you very much.
Are we doing this as one of the 4 resolutions?
I would have thought that you need to actually take it point by point. I think there may be comments.
But I think we could...
I'm willing to be advised, but I would say...
I would advise you, moderator, we go through one at a time because they're completely different matters.
Yes, they are.
And it may be less confusing.
Yes.
Okay.
With a faint hint of hope.
Okay, so Resolution 21 is before us. We are open for clarification, questions of clarification.
Jane Wade, East Midlands Synod. The blue writing, spouse, partner, dependent children, presumably that doesn't mean you can't have adult children living in the manse. Just a point for clarification.
Go ahead.
I think that is a matter for the synod by arrangement. So if you have any adult children living with you, then please do speak to your synod trust. If your synod trust owns the manse, I guess it's your elders meeting if the synod trust doesn't own the manse.
Thank you, Nicola. Okay, there are no... Okay, so we're moving into discussion now.
Anne Silas and Eastern Synod. I want to ask why the dependent children. For many of our children, and I have 2 adult children, and one of them is currently living with me because she can't afford not to. When she finishes, at the moment she's dependent on me because she's doing a degree. When she finishes her degree, she knows full well she will not get a job that will pay for her accommodation for quite a few years, and so she has said, please, Mum, can I stay? Do I really have to go and ask my elders if that's okay? This seems a little bizarre and a little cumbersome and unnecessary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Any... Romley.
Moderator, I don't know if you're happy with it, but there seem to be a lot of conversations that keep cropping up in the debate, and we can't hear the debate if people have separate debates.
Thank you. Romley.
Romilly Micklem, Wessex. Moderator, I'm convener of the Wessex Trust, and I think I can respond to Anne's point on that. The manse is provided to facilitate the work of the minister or CRCW, and dependent children don't have rights outside the rights of the minister or CRCW and their spouse or partner. As soon as somebody becomes an adult, then they can acquire rights to live in accommodation, and at that point you need to be absolutely clear what the status is of their children. I'm not saying that you can't have children, adult children living in the manse, but if I may just very briefly, I and my family don't actually live in a manse. We have a housing allowance, but when we bought our house and our adult children were sort of boomeranging in and out, I'm sure it's a familiar experience for many of us, they had to sign a declaration to say that they waived their rights to any rights that they might acquire to live in the property. And that's the sort of legality that the freeholder of the manse would need to cover. It's not trying to put shutters down on families living together. It's just trying to make sure that we've got the legal situation correct.
Thank you, Romley. Any... Okay, no one's at the microphone. So we are moving now. So there's a lot of chatter, really. Are we discussing at the microphone? Oh, thank you. So just...
I think just really what Romilly says, And the plan for partnership, because it's in covenant with the synods and local churches, we don't actually have the right to be that prescriptive over, the dependent children. So that's why it is written in that particular way. That probably doesn't help. It's not that we're ostracising or being difficult. It really is the legal situation. Okay, thank you. That's what I mean. And it also applies, I suppose, to parents living with you, things like that. Oh, sorry.
Heather Moore, Youth Assembly moderator. Can I ask a really practical question about these legal terms we seem to be using? When is a adult child a dependent and when are they not? So if they were a full-time student, does that count as a dependent? And does that mean that a working person who cannot afford their own home is not a dependent? And secondly, still on the same point, if someone is under the age of 18 but working full-time, as some people do, does that affect their dependent status, as it were?
Thank you, Heather. Lithan.
Lithan Evard, Eastern Synod. I think having some guidelines as to what would be appropriate to put in as one of these things for to be signed either by local church or synod, and what that might mean. I know that once when we moved as a family, I was asked whether paying for the water rates just applied to me or the whole of my family. And I can just see times when some churches would say, well, that means that those adults' children which should be required to pay some rent when it's not always appropriate for them. So I just would ask that there's some guidelines for synods and for local churches for this matter.
Thank you, Lithan. David?
Slightly different matter about a word that you've mentioned, national Manse guidelines, and I believe they're called Assembly Manse guidelines.
Thank you, David.
Would you like to be assistant clerk?
That was the last one. Did you want to speak, John? I can speak when you Chris. Yes. Okay.
Katie Ramsey, Northern Synod. I noticed that you've got dependent children. I'm conscious about people who have dependent adults, as in Down syndrome, different aspects of that. Would that come to be changed? Could you change it to incur that as well? Or would it just be left as dependent children? Because I'm conscious that there'll be ministers who have children who are over a certain age but are dependent because of their disability.
Thank you. Fran? Green card, yeah.
I have a green card. I'm Fran Kissack and I'm from Yorkshire, and I'm going to very sadly give this up. I maybe wonder, this is the plan for partnership, and this feels to me, as somebody who has lived for a long while in a manse, as something that is leverage on one side but not the other. So we have children who are now past the age of 18, but who may at some point need to be back living at home. I did have a mother who was very dependent, who may have needed to move in with me. And what this says is that, yes, it's there in place so that there are legalities that have to, so they don't have any rights, but it could be interpreted as, we don't have to allow this. But this is my home. And I'd like to see an expectation the other way, that the trust that operates this home allows me to live as I need to with my family, pastorally. And that should be part of the expectation, not just that there is a rule about there being dependent children. So maybe we can pass this back for more to be written about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. Would you like to speak?
Jaden Turner, Youth Assembly rep. So I started full-time work when I was 17, but I was also still a full-time student. So I'm more like expanding on Heather's point. I'm now 18 and I'm still in that work and I'm still a full-time student. So I know that this wouldn't apply to me, but there's going to be people out there in some terms like outside of the URC, I wouldn't be classed as a dependent child from my parents, but the way that you're describing it, I would. So I'm just expanding on Heather's. Could you just clarify what you mean by a dependent child?
Okay, that's clarification.
And you've got another speaker.
Oh, right. Go ahead.
Murray George, Mersey Synod. Just a question, not a proposal, but I wonder whether it might help that maybe now or maybe over time, the word children is taken out, dependence is put in, and guidelines are worked out to cover the various things. I just think there is a lot here when we delve into it, and dependence might be just the simpler term, but putting guidelines to cover some of the nuances would be sensible.
Thank you, Murray. Yes, John, you go ahead.
Thank you. This conversation kind of fascinatingly takes us to some of the complexities of the nature of the United Reformed Church and its different component entities. And one of the issues we've got is that manses are largely held in trust by synods. Some of them within synod manse schemes and therefore, as it were, for the purposes of the synod to use to house ministers. Some of them for the purposes of local churches, for local churches to house ministers. And it would be the responsibility of the 13 separate synod trusts all to, as it were, come to arrangements that their directors believed were sound and appropriate for ensuring that in the perfectly ordinary business of making a home, which we would, of course, all want ministers to be able to do in a manse, we were not giving rise to legal rights that could become complicated or protracted if anyone became difficult about it. There is a very real sense in which we cannot legislate for that as the General Assembly because it's not in our competency. Lythan's talking about some guidelines, and that's a perfect example of the kind of thing we've had a tendency to devise from scratch 13 times over. And one of the things we're trying to work on in the Church Life Review is how for those kinds of guidelines, those kinds of technicalities, might we come to some kind of working agreement and structure with 13 different trust companies such that we could develop them once over and everyone use them. But we're not quite there yet. I think we're also coming up against the reality that we're all much more aware of these kinds of legalities than we were even a few years ago, when I suspect we'd have amended this plan and not really thought about that in those terms. So we are opening up here a conversation that goes to the heart of a lot of the issues that we face on so many fronts as a denomination, and we're never going to be able to resolve them all in the way in which we devise the plan for partnership. So I think what I'm hearing is a very clear desire from Assembly that we get clarity that ministers, that the intention is very clearly that ministers may use a manse to make their home, and that will involve at moments various different people potentially living with them, elderly parents, adult children. I had visiting cousins without a home from New Zealand for 6 months once. Don't seem to recall they signed a piece of paper, but it probably would have been wise if they had. But 10 years ago, we were not thinking about that. You know, there just is a reality about that. So I think I would want to encourage Assembly to hear that we will try to find ways to take this forward. I hope you hear also the complexity of doing that. But I think there is a limit to what the plan can say at the minute, and what the plan is saying is essentially that those people for whom it would not create any legal rights to reside in a manse have the right to do so, and the plan can say that. Anything beyond it really does need to be a matter for synods. By and large, I suspect that's taken on trust at the minute. we may reach a point where we need to do that more formally. But that's going to involve negotiations across 13 synods, 13 synod trust companies, and the General Assembly. And even then, there will be some manses with individual trustees that were never put into synod trust companies, and we won't have caught them. Such is the joy of being URC. But I hope you can hear what I'm saying there.
May I invite you to respond?
Moderator, I'm just a little bit cautious from something I heard the Secretary for Ministries say, and I think Mr. George was alluding to it as well. The Secretary for Ministries talked about dependent parents, presuming elderly parents. Now, having raised that, I think it's a little unhelpful that it's not in the text. I think now you having put that before Assembly, I'm a little uncomfortable that it's not referred to in the text. And I'm also uncomfortable about rewording the plan on the hoof.
Yes. We just David. No, I think it would be easier if it's part of the revision.
David Thompson, former moderator and also a director of the Eastern Synod Trust Company. Could I suggest that we agree what we can today, that which has been thought about, and list other things that we think ought to be considered for future work?
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Moderators, let us speak.
Chantal Noppen, Church of England rep. I'm glad to hear that that kind of matches what I was going to say, but from my own personal perspective, I want to just chuck another cat into the bag, as it were. When my parents are never going to come and live with me, I've been very clear on that. Just, and I would be very nervous if they caught sight of something saying that I should feel that they should come and live with me at such a point, because that would be very bad for everybody. But when I was first ordained, I was quite a bit younger, carefree, less grey hair, single minister. And I was put in a 4-bedroomed, very nice house that I never would have afforded ever on anything I was going to do, by myself. And I'm a workaholic if I don't have someone saying, you know what, it's gone midnight, maybe shut the computer. So I had lodgers, essentially. And there was differing advice as to whether or not that was okay. And me being me, I'm not someone to... If a rule is a rule, it's a rule. But if it's a guideline, I need to know why. And I did the research, and it does have tax implications, but you declare it to the tax people, and it's fine. You can rent a room legally for a certain amount. And for my mental health, living with other people was much, much better for me. And to the degree that when my lodger, my first one, moved out because she had to she got a job in somewhere else, I couldn't afford in my head to pay for the cost of heating a 4-bedroom manse by myself, because I also owned property that I'd been told to hold on to if I could, because I probably wouldn't get back on the property ladder, and I lost my tenants. Trying to pay a mortgage and keep myself going in a very large house led me to turning my heating off through the winter in Newcastle, my first year of being ordained. I now understand that heating really affects your mental health. And it was a bad winter. So I just want to plea for caution on the bigger picture that needs to be we don't all fit that box of having the picture-perfect family. Some people are good living by themselves, it's better. Some people are not. Some people need to have other people around, and there are perfectly legal ways to do this. And yes, signing an agreement, making sure that's clear. But there's also, I don't know about you guys, but in the Anglican Church, there's a lot of unknown rhetoric about whether or not you're allowed to have additional income, and if you declare it, if they're going to cut your stipend. Well, if you're married, they don't cut your stipend, do they? They kind of go, oh, good for you, well done, you can go to Waitrose. But there seems to be this idea that, oh, well, if you up your own income yourself with additional work or having a lodger, we have the right to cut your stipend. That's just rude and wrong, frankly. So look at the bigger picture, please check these things, and don't assume that everyone will do what they need to do because they know it's fine. Some people, if they're told to do something, will assume that they're being told the right thing and it's legal and right, and then they end up suffering when actually they could have just gone, I need to check that. So, yeah. I hope that's helpful, but it might not be. Maybe it's interesting insight into my life, I don't know.
Thank you, Chantal. Thank you. Green card. Yes. No.
Michelle Richardson, West Midlands Synod. I wasn't going to use my card, by the way, but when the spirit moves, I love the URC. I love God. And this is the first time I've been moved to get out of my seat because I can't believe that we need to be looking at the legalities, because I believe that family is important because it's important to God and it's important to us. And I really would, moderator, I really would say that we need to be looking at the wording, and it needs to be gracious, because I think above all God is gracious and we should be gracious. And I just would like us to consider that when we are wording this. It's really important. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, moderator. John Skipworth, North West Synod, and I'm a trustee of the North West Synod Trust. This is a very difficult question because of the legal changes that have taken place over the last decade or so in respect of occupation of houses and the building up of rights. I would ask General Assembly to go back to your synods and make it clear, and churches if they have the ownership of their own manses, that we expect the treatment of our ministers to be done in a sensitive and Christian way, so that we recognise that the needs of the individual minister, and we've heard several different statements about that already in this debate, are taken into account. Half of me rather wishes to ask that perhaps this resolution as it stands could be withdrawn for further consideration, given the broad range of issues that have been highlighted in this debate. I don't know if that option is available, moderator, but perhaps it is something that reflects the mind of Assembly now. And I have to confess, this is the second time I've spoken, and I still forgot to bring my green card with me. Thank you.
Moderator, I would like to clarify if Mr. Skipworth is proposing that the resolution be referred back to the committee under Standing Order 12.2, or whether you're just making an informal suggestion.
Having heard the ex-clerk's advice...
I'm not ex for another 23 hours.
I think Michael is also counting those hours down. Yes, moderator, if I may, can I make it a formal proposal, as indicated by the clerk? Thank you.
In that case, is there a seconder? Right. For a motion for reference back shall be debated upon and voted, shall be debated and voted upon before the relevant report itself is debated any further. To carry such a motion, 2/3 of the votes must be cast in its favour. It can be debated. And that certainly means that the convener and secretary have a right of reply. But we are strictly debating whether it is referred back or not the substance at this point.
Whether it's referred back. Can I just...
Yeah.
So can I just ask a question then? So if it's referred back, what is actually in the plan stands?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So what is in the plan would actually say from spouse and children? Yeah. Okay.
What is in the plan stands until the Assembly or the Executive resolves to change it. If it's referred back, I think you're allowed to bring it back to a subsequent meeting with different wording or with the same wording.
Okay.
Is what we hear and that you don't resist that.
I think from an MOM point of view, we would prefer the new wording on the assurance that we would do some further work, including work with others on some guidelines. I mean, it's easy to bring back different wording rather than to leave it to go back to what it was, because part of the difficulty is it doesn't protect those who are partners and not necessarily spouses, and that is an issue. So I think the MOM subcommittee would prefer the new wording rather than the old, but on the assurance that we bring something back that expands on and gives greater clarity to the wording next time.
You may wish to inquire, moderator, if the speakers waiting are wishing to speak specifically on whether it be referred back.
Yes, there's one.
Heather Moore, Youth Assembly moderator. Yes, moderator, I'd like an answer to my question before I make a decision on whether I want it referred or not. My question being, how are we defining dependent children, specifically those under the age of 18 and in full-time work, and those over the age of 18? Thank you.
Yes, hello there. Martin Knight, Southern Synod. I would prefer that the resolution be put as it currently stands, recognising that actually work does need to be done, because what is currently here is a vast improvement on what is the current situation. From my personal situation, I have a lifelong partner. Well, I say lifelong, we've been together about 10 years. The current situation would mean, technically, that he would need to sign a piece of paper saying that he should vacate the premises should there be a problem. That's profoundly unpastoral to ask someone's life partner to have to sign a piece of paper to say that they have kind of no rights to be in the property. So currently what is suggested here under Resolution 21 is better than the current situation. So I would be advocating that we vote on Resolution 21 and then send it back for further changes as members have suggested.
Tracy, are you talking on that point? Are you speaking on that particular point? Okay. Can I just ask Nicola or Mary to respond, please?
It's different depending on the different nation.
You need to answer to the Assembly, not to us.
We're trying to work out, because our understanding is that that adult children, addressing your question, adult children, it means 18 and over, except when in full-time education. But the reason that Nicola was scrolling through her phone is it's different in Scotland. I don't think it's probably different in Wales, but
no, it says a dependent child is any person aged 0 to 15 in a household, whether or not in a family, or a person aged 16 to 18 who's in full-time education, living with a family with his or her parents or grandparents.
So a slight difference.
Yeah.
Heather, is that helpful?
Are you wanting to speak to the referred back or the original motion? Well, we need to decide on the referred back first.
Oh.
So do you want to speak to referred back?
I would like to inform the Assembly
Yeah,
I would like to inform the Assembly the policy in the Southern Synod, men's policy, to give an indication how Synod trusts have worded it. Of course, there will be differences between Scotland and everything else, but I think you would be reassured when you read this. So I would just want to put that now. It may be helpful for the discussion overall.
Thank you.
Okay, so it talks here about additional occupants. Menses are provided for the minister and their spouse, partner, in pursuance of their role as a minister and their children under the age of 18. Where any person, whether or not a family member, aged 18 or over, who is not in full-time education and not the minister or their spouse, partner, is residing in the manse on a permanent basis, the synod must be notified of this, and they must sign a legally binding agreement to say that they will not reside in the manse any longer than the minister. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could you tell us, did you do your name?
Oh.
Green card, excuse. My name is Bernard Vidder from Southern Synod. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We want to proceed to a vote on the referred back.
Okay, yeah, so a vote. It is a vote.
Yeah, it needs vote.
Okay. Okay. So on the referred back resolution 21, who's for? White card, please.
Be very.
Oh, sorry. Let's. Go ahead.
So
John,
we're voting on the question of whether or not we wish to refer this back. So you vote yes if you think that this should go back for further work before we do anything else, and you vote no if you think you want to adopt, have the chance to adopt this resolution, recognising that additional work will then be done as well. Is that clear?
Is that clear? Okay, so yes, white card.
Those who think this
Those
should be
who
referred
think this
back.
should be referred back, vote yes with your white card. Come on. Come on. That's.
And I'm still watching the football.
Somebody
Stephen
has to pick
Newell,
it up.
South West Synod. I get the sense in my little area, and I'm sorry we're all muttering, and it's an interesting thing, isn't it, when we're all muttering. I think we ought to be aware that vested interest, conflict of interest. I've lived in a manse all my life. But I think the response to Bernard's question is whether, if you're saying, yeah, we'll take that, then I'm voting yes. If you're saying, no, that's not part of what we've agreed, then I'm voting no. So I don't know what I'm voting because I don't know the response to the last speaker.
No, I don't think that's quite so, because what Bernard read to us was an extract of a policy from Southern Synod. That only applies to Southern Synod. Other synods will have their own policy. Some may not even have a policy, you never know. We can't control that. We have no ability to control that here. That's indicative of what one synod does. Others are likely to do something similar, but we don't know what all of them do. At the minute, all we are voting on is the question of, do we wish to have the opportunity to vote on this resolution substantively, or do we not wish to vote on it and want to send it back for further work? Further work is going to happen either which way. Do we want the opportunity to adopt these proposed changes or not?
Am I still able to speak in response to what you've said? Thank you. No, you're not the moderator. Thank you, moderator. That response tells me that I will be voting no, because I think it needs to go back so that more of the work can be done in order to get a better outcome. Oh, I don't know. It's a very difficult thing. I mean, I listened to the previous speaker who then said about his life partner, and this is a life partner. Is this a week, a month, 6 months, a year? How do we define those things? It feels to me, I like Southern Synod's response, but we need to be more careful and clear on those things. If we're doing this for legal reasons, I would suggest we're nowhere near ready for this to go forward. But that's my opinion. And I've lost my green card.
Tracy, would you like, do you have something to add to that?
Thank you. Tracy Lewis, South West Synod. I think what I want to say is maybe we need to look at this from a different direction in that, you know, I've lived in 4 manses now, and they just basically give me the key, and I live there. And nobody ever asks me to sign anything of a covenant of how I will treat this house. I had the architect round doing my quinquennial the other day, and he said, "Oh, thank you for the way you look after it." And I'm thinking, what? You know, there's no agreement, guidelines. It's in the terms of settlement. Perhaps I need to go back and read them, but you know. But does that include how I shall use the manse? You know, what I can do. Oh, there you go.
Okay, so I'm asking you to vote yes. Just so that we are clear, I'm asking you to vote yes. John, say yes if what?
You are being asked to vote yes if you would like to refer this back for further work.
Okay, so can I see the cards?
So
white
those voting
card.
yes with your white card, or no, you wish to proceed to take this resolution and have the chance to vote on it. You have heard the promise that further work will happen anyway.
Clear?
So
okay, in the first instance.
So those voting yes, please show. And those voting no. Moderator, I think the noes have it.
The noes have it.
So, Moderator, I think we invite you to proceed with debate on the substantive resolution.
Right. Okay, so we are back to the debate on the substantive resolution. The floor is open. The mics are there.
There's two people.
Two people are waiting.
Bernard Vidder again, Southern Synod. I probably wasn't clear. What I wanted to illustrate was me reading out the policy of Southern Synod, that what we heard is where the policy resides. Here we have guidelines. That I think you can trust your local synod trust to get this specifically right for their local situation. And there are guidelines, and they have to be right. But also, I have therefore faith in that when we vote yes for it, yes, it will be worked on further. That's not a problem. But we got one step closer to where we needed to be. But still trust your synods, and don't think the people that live in your house, at least in Southern Synod, will be affected, because that's not the rules in Southern. So, thank you.
Karen Jones, West Midlands Synod. I've just had a very anxious moment here. I can't even find 6.3.2 in the Book of Reports. It goes from point 4 to point 7. So I'm really confused by that. But also, my situation, I live on my own in a 4-bedroomed house, as Chantal pointed out. But I have an adult son who has Down syndrome. He currently lives in supported living elsewhere, but I don't know that that's permanent. And I just had a very anxious moment because it never even occurred to me before this debate started that there would be any question as to whether he could come and live with me. So I think this is a really important part that needs to be clarified. And I like to echo what Michelle said, that this needs to be done with grace, that our ministers have families, and those families should have the right to live with them as long as the minister lives there. I like what the Southern Synod put in. So I just wanted to make that point.
Moderator, I think, Karen, the debate is not about whether your adult son could come and live with you. It's about whether your adult son could acquire rights to live in the manse after you ceased to live in it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's what the whole question is about. It's not about family members living with you. It's about family members not acquiring rights when you don't live there.
Green card.
Green card?
Carol Marsden, East Midlands Synod. I actually can't see that there's a problem asking ministers to commit to something that says that the people who they have in their home will have no rights. So it feels like there should be a lighter touch way that doesn't cause pastoral offence or harm that we can deal with. But what I would plead for, because this keeps coming up time and time again with the details, is that we're doing it 13 ways. And I recognise that we have 13 different trust bodies, but those inconsistencies cause harm. And they cause harm when people aren't paid the right ratios. They cause harm when one person seems to have a better deal than somebody else. They cause harm, and that harm really does sit very deep. So I would just say we need to make sure that those 13 different trust bodies actually do and interpret them in the same way, so that it's not a better deal for some than others, or one that hurts more in some place than others. So I would just say, even though we have to do it 13 times, can we not try and do it like one and then divide it?
Thank you. Response? Oh yes, come on.
Jo Harris, National Synod of Wales. I think as an assembly, we're going around in circles. I think that we've reached a point where we've heard lots of different opinions. We've heard from ministries that they are going to take further work on this. I think we've also heard that this, as in the current wording, is going to give protection to a lot of people. So I'd like to request this resolution be put as it is now. We've heard enough, and I think just we really need to pray and then vote.
Thank you. Oh, you have seconders. Can I see the seconders?
Professor Thompson was first.
Okay. Okay. Your name goes down. Do you want to respond to anything? Some questions were asked.
I think
What do we do next?
what's now been proposed is that the question be now put, which is that we move immediately to a vote.
Okay. Do you want me to say anything?
Right.
Do they get a right
or
to
against?
say anything?
If we do move to a vote, they'll still get a right of reply before we vote on the substantive resolution. But we need to move immediately to vote
Okay.
on whether we're going to make a decision now or continue debate.
Okay, are we? Did you hear that? So, who is for making a decision now?
The proposal is that the motion be now put. If you wish to put the motion now and stop the debate, raise your white card. If you wish to continue debate, raise your white card. In which case, the proposers have a right of reply and we move immediately to a decision.
Okay.
Thank you, Moderator. We have listened to all of that, and we can sympathise as well with where this is touching raw nerves, as well as we're hearing people who are giving a different sort of view. We really, really do assure you that we will go away and look at those aspects, but we would be very pleased if this was now passed.
Oh, sorry, Mike.
There's been a request for
There's
prayer,
a prayer. Oh,
Moderator.
I didn't realise that. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's pray. Lord, thank you for families. Thank you for loved ones, friends, people that we rely on. As we vote this afternoon, we pray that you would speak to our hearts, that you would help us as we deliberate, that we would make the right decision. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. And so we move now to vote. Those for the resolution, white cards, please. Cards down. Those against. It's carried. Thank you.
Can we just say something in response to Carol?
Yeah, it's okay.
Thank you, Moderator. I just want to respond to what Carol said in such a heartfelt fashion, because I think many of us would feel that. What I want to say is that we do have this tendency to do things 13 times over, and that can drive me up the wall. One of the things I have realised is that that is in part because we have never had any mechanisms to do it differently. We've never had a mechanism that has allowed 13 different trust companies to consult with one another, come up with agreed ways of approaching things so that we can have one policy that will mean everyone is treated the same everywhere. That may be a pipe dream. I don't actually think it is. I think there's a great deal of goodwill for as much collaborative working as we can possibly have. And part of what we're doing in the Church Life Review is trying to consult, and this will be part of the consultation exercise in November, on exactly what such mechanisms would look like to enable us to do that. But I feel a bit sorry for trust companies at times, because people go on at them about going off on a frolic and doing their own thing, when we've never provided them any option to do anything other than that. So all being well, we can keep working at this, but I think what Carol said underlines for me why this matters, and it's not just about legalities and compliance. It's actually about human beings and grace.
Thank you, John. I'm just keeping...
22.
Yes, I'm just keeping quiet for just a short while. And so we move now to Resolution 22. Can we have it on the screen? Are you...
So the fixed car allowance has been at 1,200 since it came into being in 2008, and the M&M subcommittee looked at obviously increasing it. There were three reasons for doing that. One was inflation. The second was that car prices have risen quite considerably. We did one source suggests, as the paper says, car prices have risen between 54% and 123% in 10 years. And also at interest rates. We also looked at the cost of leasing a small car, a Honda Jazz for 48 months, which would cost about £330 per month currently. And then the average cost of motoring in 2023, that's running costs and ownership, at £3,556. With all the possible variations and exceptions, the committee felt it was impossible to make a logic-based proposal that would withstand objections. So our instinct was simply that we propose to double it, and then going forward to come up with the formula that we would review at every 2 years. That seemed fairer to ministers, and when I use the word ministers, obviously minister of word and sacraments and church-related community workers, who are being required by their churches, not deliberately or knowingly, but the fact that most of us use our own cars to bear more of the necessary car purchasing and funding costs, insurance, for example, that has eaten into that standard allowance that was first set way back. I did ask how many ministers have their own church-owned cars, and at the moment it's 10. So the majority of us use our own cars. So I therefore move Resolution 22.
Floor is open now. There we are. The floor is open now for clarification questions.
Romilly Micklem, Wessex. I want clarification on whether this is something that you urge local church to do, or whether it's something that you urge synods to do, because as I understand it, and I really ought to know this, the car allowance is set in the terms of settlement, which is not actually a local church. The local church signs the terms of settlement, but so do synods. So I'm not sure, please clarify, that it is something you can urge a local church to do, or whether it's something that you should actually be asking synods.
Thank you, Romley. Margaret? Good Lord, yeah.
Hello everyone, I'm Margaret Ali from Thames North Synod. Being a biker, I use cycle from both of my churches to commute. So I'm just wondering what arrangements we have for people who use bikes.
Thank you, Margaret.
Faith Paulding, Eastern Synod. Just a question for clarification. For those considerable number of churches where the fixed car allowance is collected by direct debit along with their ministry and mission gifts, they're not actually going to be urged to implement it. They will be almost required to implement it with the change because of the direct debit mechanism. Now, I'm not saying that I oppose this at all. I support it, but it's just, it's not urging because the churches has no agency. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Trevor.
Trevor Jemison, Northern Synod. I appreciate that when ministries put this resolution together, that happened before we discussed paper X2 from Northwestern Synod, a church with people at the margins, a strategy for mission and ministry. But it did lead me to wonder, when you were putting the resolution together, was any thought given to the possibility that an equal across-the-board financial rise in cost would have might have a bigger impact upon churches and congregations in low-income communities?
Thank you, Trevor. Would you like to respond to these questions of clarification, Mary or Nicola?
I'm looking for the bike. Push bike. Yeah. Is it 10p a mile? I think so. We might have to.
Just bear with us, please.
Thank you. The first question from Romilly, we will be asking pastorates. It wasn't Romilly, was it? Who was it? Standing over there. Can't remember. It was. Sorry. I'm trying to write and look at the same time. Yes, I mean, I would bid it in terms of pastorates rather than churches, because there aren't many churches that stand alone doing this for a minister. It would be yes, it is in the terms of settlement, and yes, it would be in there, so they would be updated, and yes, it would be. The word urge, I'm not quite sure what other word we would use, because we do require it. Sorry? Require? Yes, require is a better word.
I'm wondering if we can reword it to achieve the objective without some of the queries. If this is nonsense, ignore me. But I wonder if we simply say General Assembly changes the rate for the fixed car allowance from 1,200 to 2,400 and the fixed motorcycle allowance rate from 300 to 600 in the plan for partnership with effect from 1st of January 2025. And whatever happens about who implements it will be the same as who implements the current figures.
That's true. Yes.
And we seem to be worrying about who's implementing it, and I think we should be discussing the figures.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing is we are looking up, there is an allowance for bicycles, and we're just looking
20 pence per mile.
20 pence a mile, we think.
Yeah, but I don't know about purchase.
I don't think there's anything for purchase. We're looking it up. I think that was all the questions.
I think I may have been proposing an amendment in order to help the committee do what I think it's trying to do. If I was, is there anyone who wants to second? Right, let's try again. General Assembly changes the figure for the rate. General Assembly changes the rate of the fixed car allowance from £1,200 to £2,400, and the fixed motorcycle allowance, which is the phrase that's used in the plan, from £300 to £600 from 1st of January 2025. In the plan for partnership. Excellent. That's why we have a minutes secretary. Would you like to pass me your notes so I can read it coherently? Oh, this handwriting's almost like mine, but very different. General Assembly changes the rate of the fixed car allowance from £1,200 to £2,400 and the fixed motorcycle allowance from £300 to £600 in the plan for partnership with effect from 1st of January 2025.
Yes, we accept that. Thank you, and we accept that if once it's changed.
Would you like to talk after I ask?
Yeah?
I think, moderator, procedurally we vote on the amendment and then we'll return to the substantive discussion.
So we are voting on the amendment. Those for it? Cards down. Those against? Okay, that's through. So did you want to know?
Just the bicycle?
Yeah, talk about that.
Bicycles, what we believe is it's 20 pence a mile, but there is nothing written into the partnership at the moment about wear and tear, so we will take that away and we'll look at that because there should be.
Okay, so now. Okay, so we are voting again.
I had a question for clarification, moderator. I had a question for clarification, moderator, and I don't think I heard an answer.
Can you?
It had thought been given to an equal amount of money across all pastorates, possibly having a disproportionate effect on pastorates in low-income neighbourhoods. And the question was, had that been part of your discussion when putting the resolution together?
Okay, so we are debating the substantive motion after the response.
I think you can finish the clarification answer and then
Okay.
we'll go on to...
I think all we can say is it has been considered because what we've been doing is or other people have been doing is taking in the whole of the denomination. That's all I can say. But yes, it has been considered.
If I could just offer a comment there. The principle by which we have always operated the fixed car allowance is that it is paid by the pastorate. So if that has a negative impact on pastorates from less well-off areas, that's already baked into decisions that we have taken. So in a sense, this is working on exactly the same principle. We could decide we want to entirely change the principle. We do it and do it through M&M, which would change the way it was funded and perhaps alleviate that problem. But we never have chosen to do that, and this proposal is not suggesting that we do that. So it is simply working with the principles that we have already agreed for this particular payment.
Thank you, John. So we are debating, yes, so come to the microphone. Green card.
Chris Atherton, National Synod of Wales. Can I ask, given that we're now in a slightly different area where we begin to think about net zero things a little bit more, that perhaps consideration would be given to a purchase allowance for bicycles, as they are just as expensive as motorcycles?
You've got to put a green over there, moderator.
I'll take the green first. Steve. Yeah.
Moderator Steve Faber, West Midlands Synod.
I'm playing my joker on this round, so can I have the rate increased to 4,800, please? I'm actually wanting to make 2 serious points. I had a very unwelcome email this morning when I woke up to see that my car insurance renewal is due. And because it's auto-renewal, I was told what the amount will be in effect from the middle of August. We have a multi-car insurance policy. My wife's insurance is going up £100. My insurance is going up £400 per year. Principally, so far as I can tell, because I had to make a claim to replace a windscreen when it was cracked by a stone flung up by a lorry. So I'm paying for the windscreen to be replaced under the insurance by a massively increased insurance premium. Fixed car costs are no longer fixed. They are increasing very rapidly and substantially. I also wanted to thank very much the Ministries Committee, both for this proposal and for their very positive engagement ahead of Assembly, and for accepting the amendment that it should take effect from January, much as my bank account needs it to take effect from September. We wanted to recognise the financial planning effect for local churches and give them time to adjust their finances, hence the reason why the West Midlands wanted the modification from January. I want to encourage in the strongest possible terms that Assembly should support this resolution. I'm also very grateful that ministries have already given the assurance that there will be much further work done on the plan. And things like the verb that was in the original form, urges churches, I think we need to do much more work more generally on the plan, which ministries have undertaken to do. Because we are in a covenantal relationship, we do need to set common standards as far as we possibly can. So I'm really grateful to ministries for this resolution and for their cooperation so far.
Thank you, Steve. Oh, you Dan.
Hello, Daniel Harris, Northwest Synod, I think. Yes, that's right. Yes, I wanted to share, because I'm a motorbike rider and a bicyclist, and I lost my licence because I had a pacemaker fitted during COVID. So when I was ordained, I spent the first 2 years cycling around Northwest Synod. My mission partnership was at 15, 20 miles wide. So I did about 2,000 miles in my first year, although I had nothing to show for it, I'm afraid. Yeah, but, you know, still haven't got that. Yeah, but, and buying an electric bicycle, because I have both, buying a decent electric bicycle that will work for more than 1 year, because if you buy cheap, you buy twice. It's like buying a really knackered motorbike. It will cost about £3,000. So there's occasions where somebody might lose a licence, and it has happened to more than one of us over times, not due to speeding or anything nefarious, but due to health or something. And an electric bicycle makes a massive difference, because obviously you don't want to arrive at a church sweaty or something like that. You know, some of you might prefer doing that sort of thing, but I'd rather arrive at a church looking fairly smart. And so I would suggest maybe some thought about support for an electric bicycle in the fixed terms thing, maybe under medical grounds, because it could make the difference between someone staying on 2 wheels and keeping transport going and still ministering, or not. So, and if people want to put a claim for walking, can we do that too?
Shoe leather allowance.
Can I?
Point do we need to stop the Jubilee ministers?
So I'm almost making a suggestion of a motion of, can we put something in for electric bicycles under medical grounds? I'm almost doing that. But this is
if it gets moved to the next session, it will
Thank you.
kind of
Thank you,
end
Dan.
up
Yeah.
with evening prayer and in memoriam.
I see. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to. I see a green card.
Thank you. John Evely from the Yorkshire Synod. Just so that we don't go through this sort of debate periodically hereafter, I wonder whether it would be in order to move another amendment to suggest that at the end of the At the end of the statement, it reads, and the rate of RPI annually thereafter, so that at least, because I think I heard it said that that this rate hasn't been reviewed for a number of years, and at least if we kept it rising by the rate of RPI or another measure, it would at least mean that we don't have to keep having these sorts of debates periodically going forward. Just so I would suggest that amendment.
Thank you.
If that is an amendment, we need to deal with it.
Okay, we have to do, yes.
That's now an amendment, so we need to deal with the amendment. It probably is a change of policy. Is this amendment in order? Because it has financial implications that haven't been considered elsewhere. So I think that amendment's out of order, moderator. Briefly.
Just to say that we're not going to leave it another X number of years before we are pledging to review it on a regular basis. And at the moment that was going to stand at every 2 years. But we do review things very, very regularly. So just please get that assurance.
Thank you. Green card.
Good afternoon, Messina Marco, Southern Synod. I've always been exercised about this fixed car allowance, and especially as somebody mentioned, going to net zero. Are we encouraging ministers to use cars? And especially in a place like London and other big metropolitan areas with very good public transport, shouldn't maybe say give people a season ticket rather than a fiscal allowance? Because if they have fiscal allowance and then they use public transport, do they claim that in expenses?
Thank you, Mercy. It's Craig.
Craig Muir, East Midlands Synod. I will benefit from this in an increase coming perhaps from January, but my churches won't. And my churches are already eating into their reserves, and my churches are already cutting back on what they're offering to M&M because they can't afford it. And when I mentioned this to one of them, they were appalled. Their faces sank at the thought of having to pay another £100 a month to pay me a fixed car allowance. And I'm not prepared to take that from them. And where my pastorate, I need a car. You know, the way the pastorate's been set up, buses don't work. So this cannot be a burden on the local church. And if we are going to pass this at assembly level, then, sorry, Treasurer, but it needs to come out of an assembly pot and not out of our local churches. Sorry, I cannot support this.
Thank you, Craig. Sal.
Sally Bateman, Northern Synod. We heard about the electric bike and whether that could be considered for an allowance. Have we anywhere in Plan for Partnership considered the use of disability scooters, or could that be incorporated in that allowance as well? Because I want us to be equitable and fair across the whole spectrum.
Thank you, Sal. Were you next? Yeah.
Stephen, your South West Synod. This does affect me. I would get the fixed car allowance. I was going to propose an amendment that we make the bike allowance £150 because they go down in halves, you see. That's the logic that I could see. But I'm not allowed to do that, I know, because that would be out of order, because there'd be financial implications. I do actually also warm to the previous speaker. I think it is an issue for the local churches. But one question for clarification. I've never really fancied a motorbike because I fell off one in Taiwan. So can I get that as well? Is this, I get a car allowance and a motorbike? My treasurer is
only
shaking
one.
his head. Only one. So I have to choose between the cycle and the car. Fair. Ignore the whole thing about the bike.
Thank you. Ian.
Ian Kirby, National Synod of Wales. One of my most prized possessions and an advantage of living in Wales is this. It's a free bus pass. Those people who know me very well will know I am not afraid to use it. In a fit of eco-friendliness, I worked out how it would be possible to attend an elders meeting in one of my more far-flung chapels using the bus pass. It's a journey that in the car takes 40 minutes. I worked out that it would take 3 hours each way with a few dodgy connections. I appreciate that in London, Birmingham, Manchester and many other urban areas, there are plenty of buses around for people to catch. I know I go there to photograph them. In rural Wales, we have a very good bus service through the village, but it is incompatible with what I need to use it for. Please bear that in mind.
Thank you, Ian. Chantal.
I appreciate this is probably quite annoying. Chantal Noppen, Anglican, Church of England, yes. I spoke at General Synod last week about the basic living allowance and benefits and how they're tied in and how it should be with essentials guarantee in mind. And there's striking similarities, I think, in this debate because of the transport issue. So I've spent 11 years working on estates in the northeast of England, and you can get rural communities where you get a bus twice a week. And if you live on an estate, you can, like the guy just before me said, the journeys can be 5 times as long if you're going by public transport, because often transport is on a kind of radial transport. You don't have lateral connections. I think there's been some really good points made, and I think perhaps it might be worth considering. I don't know how to say this in a not horrible way. Sometimes we try and keep our wording of how we've done stuff because that's how we've always done it, and so that will be best, right? But sometimes that's not the answer, and I wonder if maybe looking at this whole thing a bit more blue sky and being transport and mobility budget. So then, if you are in inner city London, then what your needs are different. If you're in rural communities, what your needs are different. If you have disabilities that require your mobility to be different, that can be taken into account. I appreciate that that is going to involve a lot more work for certain people, but I would echo the idea that everyone should ultimately be treated with equity, not equality. That we have, if we're genuine about making things accessible and inclusive, and all our communities to be able to be an active part, how we do things has to be able to be variable. And the local church itself, having worked in estates, my congregations wouldn't be able to up giving £100 a month, no way. But I'd hate them to think that that meant they didn't deserve to have me. Because I'm worth more than that, at least, come on. So I just think it's maybe the sentiments are good, but actually your wording, I think, might be inadvertently limiting you. And so I want to encourage you to be a bit more out the box and go, well, what is it about? It's about transport, it's about mobility, it's about what makes sense in this scenario, in this situation, and what is practical. And it will take time to get that working, but don't just reinvent the old, essentially, is what I'm saying, I would say.
Anne, thank you, Chantal.
Anne Sardis, Eastern Synod. Before I had the joy of moving to a rural synod where I used my car all the time, I ministered in London for 25 years. It's not a case of car or public transport, even for those of us who have worked in London or work in London. My car would do very little when I was in London, but when I needed it, I needed it. And so my fixed car allowance ensured that I could pay my insurance, etc., so that when I had to use a car, I could use it. So let's not assume that those who are in the great places where there is public transport don't need cars, because sometimes we do.
Thank you, Anne. Trevor? And I think this will be the last.
Trevor Jemison, Northern Synod. In the response to my original question about an equal amount to all pastorates, and whether it had been considered that this might have a greater impact in churches in low-income neighbourhoods. I think at the end of the day, the answer I heard was no, it hadn't been considered, because it was simply a follow-on from the system that had been put in place with fixed car allowance, and it was a change of the figures. In which case, although I'm not minded to vote against this, I think it would be good for us to consider the implications of having a system that charges equally across pastorates that have unequal resources with which to pay.
Thank you, Trevor. Would you like to respond?
To those that talked about bicycles, electric bikes, disability, I'm not quite sure on the disability scooter and whether there are other implications there. But we will certainly look at that as the MOM. To Trevor, I kind of nodded as you were talking. It is a piece of work that we could and would look at. But obviously supplemental to as part of our work. So I wouldn't think that the MOM subcommittee would resist looking at that. And then I would just like to say, you know, as somebody who was born pigeon-toed, knock-kneed, and my hips rotate the wrong way, and live in London, I cannot get from the station to home without a car or without my wonderful husband picking me up. So he's just smiled at me. But I do understand the sentiments behind it. But I just want to thank everybody for their contributions. You know, it's good to hear how people are thinking.
Okay, we're going to vote on the substantive resolution. Those for resolution 22. Cards down. Those against. We have a vote for, clearly for. Thank you. Carried. Thank you.
Yeah.
The General Secretary has a plan.
Yes. The General Secretarial allowance. No. Oh, there used to be one of those, did there? Oh, it's amazing what you learn, isn't it? Right, okay. We are going to move now to the moment where we name and, for those who are present, greet ministers marking their jubilees or ministers who are new to the role of ministers since the last General Assembly. That will mean that we are a little bit late for coffee, and I apologise for that. We will then come back after coffee and continue with these ministries' resolutions until, at the very latest, 5:15, when we will move to evening prayer, in which we will remember with thanks those ministers who have died since we last met. So we will do our celebrating of Jubilee ministers and new ministers now. Coffee, ministries, resolutions, evening prayer, football. Okay?
And if the ministry's resolutions are really quick, we might do some of the other stuff we would have done this afternoon as well.
The clerk is a hard taskmaster.
So, to celebration.
Firstly, we celebrate those ministers celebrating notable anniversaries of their ordinations during this year, beginning with those who were ordained in 1974 and are celebrating the 50th anniversary of their ordinations. Anne Francis Jackson, John Maldwin Parry, Walter John Houston, Peter Heckles, Anthony Roger Lee, David Howlett, George Clifford Graham Bembridge, Bernard Allen Collins, Richard Frank Davis, Anita Margaret Evans, Rodney John Wood, William Dick McNaughton, Gerald Christopher Moole. And then those celebrating the 60th anniversary of their ordinations this year, who were ordained during 1964. James Ashford Holliman, Neville Jarrett, Derek Allen Newton, Anthony John Coates, Adrian Stanley John Phippen, Stephen Mitchell Thornton, Derek Jeffrey Wensley, Robert John Blows, Frank Jones, Joseph Ross McLaren, and Robert Freeland Phillip. And then we celebrate those who were ordained during 1954, which was before even I was born, and are therefore celebrating the 70th anniversary of their ordinations this year. Malcolm Hill, Brian Edward Ranford, Anthony David Tucker, and eye-wateringly, we honour someone who was ordained in 1949 and is celebrating the 75th anniversary of their ordination this year. Peter John Humphrey Brewer. And then we go on to celebrate those at the other end of their ministries, ministers who are new to their United Reformed Church roles. Firstly, Roberta Mary Ritson, Louise Sanders, This is going to take a time. Gilbert Asu Asambi. Walt Wallace Johnson. Karen Helen Jones. Mark Andrew Rogers. Gillian Barbara Bailey. Stanislaus Chatikobo. Margaret Ruth Dewis. Nathan Glover Eddy. It's not here. Rodolphe Blanchard Kowal. David George Cumbers. John Francis Arthur O'Hanlon. Alice Victoria Louise Gilbert. And Derek MacDonald.
Can I just ask if there are any Jubilee ministers present who we remembered? Because if so, it would be lovely for you to come forward and be greeted by the moderator. They seemingly have better things to do in retirement.
At such a wonderful time of celebration, let us bring the celebration to God. Let's pray. Wonderful God, how good and wonderful this is. What a cause for celebration. We give you thanks for the 50, the 60, the 70, and the 75 years of service in your church as your ministers. And we give you thanks for those who are just starting out new. We ask your blessing upon all of them. And at this time, as we remember those who are currently serving in United Reformed churches, we also remember and give thanks for Rob Seaman, a former member of staff at URC Church House, who is being ordained today as an Anglican priest, ordained as a deacon at Peterborough Cathedral. Wonderful God, ever old and ever new, we ask your blessing upon them all. Cover them with your blessings as they go forward in their journeys. Keep them faithful, keep them strong, and keep them yours. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay, we go now for a break, and you come back at 4:15. See you at 4:15.
Thank you. Moderator, I know you're about to say something. While you're doing that, I wonder if the representatives of the Ministries Committee might like to be over here.
Thank you, Michael. I just want to address General Assembly for just very briefly. Friends, we are aware that there are some young people sitting on the floor and that they are talking occasionally to with one another to help them to engage with the business that is ahead of us. As moderator, I am quite content with that. And I suggest that if this disturbs you, I would suggest you move seats to the other side of the hall. And, this is really, as light as it is, I'm being very serious about this. Several of, they've identified, let's put it this way, let us just accommodate each other with grace and love. Thank you. Thank you. So we are continuing with, where are we? A resolution 23 now. Are you ready to speak on that?
So resolution 23 really is just a change of wording to sort of avoid unnecessary employment language. So we talk about, instead of talking about the ministerial working week, we talk about ministerial hours. And so I should say that there is actually a resolution which I think was Appendix 1, General Assembly 2012, which has the policy of the ministerial working week as it was then, that will be changed to ministerial working hours, should you accept this wording. So I so move resolution 23.
The resolution is in front of you. Time for, questions of clarification. Green card.
Out the way. Sorry. Ecumenical love. Louise Franklin, Mersey Synod. Just a clarification or a question regarding what is said in 4.7 about few ministers are able to take a fixed day off per week. I think it gave me reason for slight disquiet. Whereas I understand the pressure of the working week for ministers and how difficult it is sometimes to cram everything in that is expected by ourselves or others, I do firmly believe that it is an act of important self-care, almost rebellion or resistance, as Walter Brueggemann once said. Get me quoting Walter Brueggemann. And an act of Sabbath. And I think it's really important that our denomination actively and positively encourages us and expects us to have a set period of a day off that we would be religious in keeping. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise.
Moderator, Tom Osborne, Methodist rep.
Okay.
And some of my thunder has indeed been stolen because, well, I might come to that in the debate, but I do have a clarification question, which is to do with the resolution, which states that it agrees a change of wording from ministerial working week to ministerial hours in 7, yet the blue text in 7 seems to suggest it's changing more than simply the word working week to hours. So which is it?
Thank you. No more questions? Would you like to respond?
Amen, sister. I would, yes, as for well-being. Here the Secretary for Ministry say that we should be taking a day off per week. It is just sometimes not possible, and it was really to reflect that for those that don't or are not able to take a week off per day, a day off, it's too long, a day off per week. The danger is that they don't take off any time at all, and it was to avoid that. I'm very guilty of sometimes not taking what I should take. It was really a reminder to me that I needed to take the time. So I would say, when we do our kind of revisions of stuff, I will make it absolutely clear that this really is about self-care, and that we do urge ministers to take that day off. But thank you very much for reminding me. And to Tom, the original says ministerial working week, and it goes on the 2020 resolve that there should be more clarity in defining hours of work, and should be recommended that, translated into hours into a 4-week period, a minister should be working no less than 160 and not more than 192 hours. So that's why there is a bit more than just the word work that's changed. Yeah.
Thank you. We're moving into discussion. Tom.
Tom Osborne, Methodist, and sorry, this is down to my understanding of clarification against discussion. So I was going to make a similar point to which was made during the clarification, but I would want to re-emphasise it and offer something back from the Methodist experience. Our recent stationing review has actually got the Methodist Church to the point where we are considering 2 days a week rest. I would want to strongly feed back that actually I really don't think the wording as you have it at the moment is good enough. I hear what's said about, well, sometimes it's not possible. Absolutely. I am a superintendent minister. There are weeks when I do not have a rest day, but I think the language, but nonetheless I know that our guidance is very clear, that I am more than expected to. It is strongly an expectation, and it's my failure when I don't. And in the light of that, we are now exploring encouraging 2 days off. So I just offer back to General Assembly that there might indeed be some significant further work that needs to be done to this moving forward.
Thank you, Tom.
Romilly Micklem Wessex Synod. Sorry, Stephen Newell, South West Synod. This is the thing that I did want to talk about, but I don't really need to because Louise said it so brilliantly. But the worry I have is that we sort of let it go through. This is huge. For ministers, we need to be told that if we're to follow the God who is the God, I mean, what distinguished the God for the ancient Near Eastern peoples? Well, what's your God tell you to do? Well, I've got to do everything. What about, we're allowed a day off? You're allowed a day off? This was massive, and it still is. I mean, I like the idea from the Methodists of having 2 days off, but we're paid not to work. That's one of our other strange things that we say, and yet we work like madness. I mean, I don't know. I just feel we need to strengthen this so that we really are urging all of our ministers to have a regular day off. It's madness. We're playing to the world. Our God said, stop. I've got to go and collect the manna. No, stop. So I urge you to find a way to make this, what Louise said, and get it in there. Thank you.
The moderator's invited me to respond. I think we're getting just slightly confused about what this resolution is and is not doing. The only words it's changing are the ones in point 7, where it introduces the language of service and not work, and that's to avoid employment language. The actual policy, our existing policy, which remains our policy, is that there should be, it is recommended that translated into hours in a 4-week period, a minister should be serving no less than 160 hours and not more than 192 hours. That change was made to move away from the notion that ministers had a day off a week. It introduces the flexibility for ministers to organise and arrange their hours precisely so that it's possible for them to have perfectly legitimately, within what we say here, 2 days off a week. Or even 3 days off a week. If you know, sometimes we do work ridiculously long days, and, you know, that too would be fine here. Or if you do have a week, you know, where you've 4 funerals and 3 church meetings and 2 elders meetings, it's perfectly all right over the month to say, well, the next week I'm having 3 days off. And that's what the policy is framed to do. The only change that's being made here is to change the language of work to the language of service.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Stephen?
Once Stephen Newell, South West Synod, once that dam is burst. Okay, I hear what you're saying, John, and the point is, I understand that this has been brought from ministries to make things more legal, as lots of things have, and that's all good. But we are not, strictly speaking, a legalistic church. We're a church of faith. We're a church where we take our inspiration from Scripture. So you've got there, this is in 7, the ministers should be serving no less than 160 hours and not more than 192 hours, and I'm fine with that. My thing is we should then be saying quite clearly, and General Assembly strongly urges all of our ministers to take a regular Sabbath, something like that. I'm just saying it needs to be in there. I don't think it changes the law, but we're not a people of law. We're a people of grace, and we're a people who are trying to follow the God who said, no, stop, rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. Moderator, this is a technical resolution changing how we describe our existing policy. It's actually out of order at this point to be trying to change the policy. We can do that in other ways at other times, but this resolution is to change how we describe the policy, not to change the policy.
Thank you. Craig? Just.
Romilly Micklem, Wessex. I can't remember what the standing order is, I'm afraid. I'd like to move that the motion be now put.
Remained. Thank you.
Is there a seconder? I think so.
You have many.
I'm sure I saw a hand somewhere.
Yeah, okay. So, we can go to vote on that. Okay, so we go to a vote on whether we put it now. White cards, please. Cards down.
You need to ask for any against.
Yes, I'm just about to.
Excellent.
Any against? Any against? 1. 2. Thank you. It's you know.
So it is now.
It's now put. So we will be voting now on the substantive resolution.
They have a right of reply.
Do you want to say anything? No. Okay. So we are voting on the substantive resolution, and we are in discussion mode. No, we are in...
We're in voting mode.
We're voting mode. Right, okay, bear with me. Right, so those for, white cards. Those against. 2. Thank you. Carried. Thank you.
Resolution 24.
Okay, so resolution 24 is...
Sorry.
Oh, 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. Resolution 24, yes, it's on the screen. Nicola.
So, yes, a resolution 24 was really just to give a little bit more clarity and expand on. We had failed to mention bank holidays and Christmas Day or Good Friday, and this was just to clear up in response to questions that we had about bank holidays, about Christmas Day and about Good Friday.
Thank you. Clarification questions. Craig.
Craig Muir, East Midlands Synod. This is partly the same point I wanted to make in the last one, but couldn't. Changes the holiday entitlement in 8 doesn't make sense. If you take that resolution, as many of us will, when you then look at the resolutions we've made in 8 what, it needs to refer to the paper. It just doesn't make sense, as it didn't make sense in the other one to say in 7.
Thank you. You want to respond?
I think I can edit that in the minutes to capture exactly what is intended. So in 23, paragraph 7 of paper H4 of GA 2024 and in resolution 24 amends the changes to holiday entitlement in paragraph 8 of paper H4 GA 2024. Yeah, I'm seeing lots of support. We will clarify whether the numbers refer to the plan for partnership or the paper, and we'll get it right in the minutes.
What I tried to do was, rather than waste paper, I didn't put it all in the plan. The plan is quite big, so I have used in the blue, it's not blue one, it's blue on mine. So things like 7, 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4 correspond with the plan for partnership.
Okay. Are we still in clarification mode? So any questions of clarification? So we are in discussion mode now. We are going to vote now. Resolution 24 is in front of you. Those for? Down, hands down. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much for the difficult work you've done, Mary and Nicola. Thank you so much. It was where do we go? Business. A8. Okay. Okay, so we're moving to paper I3, the Gaza crisis. Can you, those who are reporting, come please? The stream, please.
As before, I think, moderator, we've been operating with the live stream switched off while debating this substance. Yes. So we'll wait for a thumbs up. We have thumbs